Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. So I've been getting a lot of questions about buyer's guides. I mentioned, possibly doing those and maybe kind of giving you some pointers to look for when you're out there shopping for bikes. And kind of a refresher, some of the different options that the bikes had or could have, and how you would assess the value of a bike. So today I brought out two 185Ss. They're both 1983s. One is a nice bike, one's ready to ride and ready to go. The other is a fixer-upper, but it does run and drive, stops, it doesn't smoke. So I'm going to say the engines are basically on an equal playing field. They both start right up and they both run. What more can you really ask for it from that? But beyond the engines, everything else is completely different. So I'm going to kind of go over the bikes, what to look for, and then I'm going to kind of give you an appraisal or an assessment of what the bike should cost in my area if it was for sale. That said, I'm also going to talk about what parts cost if you were to buy a fixer-upper. And I think you'll see real quick that spending a little more money up front for a nicer riding bike, you are going to be hundreds and hundreds of dollars, if not thousands, ahead. So let's get started. I'm going to show you the nice bike first, and then we'll kind of talk about the not so nice bike. So here we go. You get to you get to the seller's house, and this is what he rolls out from the shop. He squirted it off with the water hose a couple of days ago. He took some pictures and he posted it on Marketplace, and you are lucky enough to be the first guy or gal there. And you go, well, you did the right thing. And the night before you went to look at this bike, and this is really, really important. This is probably the most important thing I can share with you in this entire video. You got to do your homework. The night before, let's just go through this. You find it on Marketplace or Craigslist. You call the guy, gal, and you go, hey, I can be there tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Great. You've got from now until 2 o'clock to educate yourself on what you're looking at. This is extremely important. People don't do this. You got to do this. Go online, look up the same make and model item, in this case 1983 Honda 185S ATC 3-wheeler. Put that in Google and you're going to come up with a lot of pictures and websites and opinions. Just like mine, everybody's got an opinion and we all know what they're worth. So that said, do your homework. Get a picture of what the bike looked like from the factory. Don't look at lifted ones and lowered ones and souped up ones and don't look at that. Go find an original brochure of what the bike looked like when it was new. Okay? Now, that said, when you look at this bike, you're already going to have your homework. You're already going to read the specs on this bike, and you're going to know that it's a 185S, and you know that they only made it for 3 years, and you know that this particular one is an 83 because it has the telescopic front end on it. It was only made in that year. You're also going to know real quick that, hey, those wheels and tires aren't original equipment. You're going to also realize that that seat is not original equipment, and that rack was a factory option. It didn't come with that. Most of them came with no rack at all. You're going to learn real quick that that tank is not the right tank for this bike, and someone has painted the engine black. It didn't come that way. Now that's a lot. That's a lot that you just learned just by walking in the room and seeing this bike because you did your homework. From this point on, you are miles ahead when making a financial decision of how you're going to spend your money. You've already, in your mind, rattled off pros and cons of whether or not you're going to buy this bike. The price at this point is irrelevant. We'll get to that in a minute. We've already assessed an overall opinion on the bike, good, bad, or indifferent. You can catch all of that really quick as long as you did your homework. Now, if you didn't do your homework and you walked up to this bike, you wouldn't know any of that. You would think that the bike came this way, and you go, wow, that bike looks really good. It's 35 years old, and it looks really good. And it does. But you wouldn't know any of that other items that I just told you. So things to look for when you're shopping for a bike. Look for wear items, things that wear out, things that might get replaced over the years, things maybe that should have got replaced over the years. Everybody knows to check the air filter. But guess what? On this bike, you got to have a wrench to check the air filter. This seat is part of the fenders, and the fenders are locked down right now, not by the latch that holds them on, but also by this rack. This rack has to be unbolted. So you're kind of wondering what that air filter might look like. Does it have one? Does it have a cover? We know those covers are, you know, $15, $20 online. Does it have an air filter element inside? There's another $15. All of a sudden, you know, the meters are running. The cost is going up or down depending on what you find. Is the seller going to allow you to take this assembly off so you can inspect that air filter? Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. So you walk in the room, and this is what the person pulls out to show you. This is the pictures. This is the bike. They put pictures online. First thing you want to look for is tires. These tires look really good until you look really close at them. See this dry rot? See those cracks in there? Yep. So this tire is dry rotted. It's old. It's a very old tire. It's still got life left in it, but if you were to ride it every day, more than likely you're going to put a stick through it pretty quick. Check the front suspension. You know, this does have it. Does it cycle? Does it make noise? Does it squeak? You know, does it rebound okay? This one, actually, I put bearings in the front end on it. See that grease down there? So someone's been in there. Look for signs of repair, maintenance, or, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. Look for those types of things. If you see RVT hanging out of a cylinder head, or you see grease hanging out from a bearing, ask a question. Ask the seller, hey, did you grease this recently? Yeah, I did. I put new bearings in it. Great. This bike also has new brakes on it. I put them on there myself, but you wouldn't know that. You would have to take that, take the word of the seller for that. There's grease up here where I've greased the pin, where the actual mechanism for the brake actually pivots. You can see that. The brakes are intact on this bike. You can roll this bike and hit the brake, and you can feel it engage and work. So the brakes work, or the front brake works on this bike. The fender, someone spray painted this fender if you look really close. See how the fender, it's got two different colors of red on it? So somebody spray painted this fender. Now, is that a deal breaker? No, it looks okay from 20 feet away. It looks quite nice. Someone's been monkeying around with this headlight. Now the headlight works on this bike, but somebody spray painted it here, and the black is all coming off on it, and you know, probably could use a real good buffing, but it's got a split in it here. Now I'm really nitpicking this bike. So what else do we know? These front forks here, somebody's painted them. Somebody's probably painted this bike all black. That was real popular 20 years ago, I guess. I don't know why, but somebody did it. More than likely the original tank was painted black, and it's even possible that these fenders aren't the original fenders. So they get crazy with the spray paint, and that's what you end up with. And since these are, you know, you got to take the whole front end apart to get all this paint off, that's why that's left like it is, and nobody's changed it back out. So look at your controls. You know, make sure they function. You have a two-piece on-off switch. It's off in both directions, high, low. You push up on it, move it over for low and high, bring it back to low, and then if you watch when I bring it over to off, it will drop down, on and off. Now these bikes don't have batteries, so the light's not going to work unless the engine's running. You need to know that going in. This is your throttle here, thumb throttle, nothing fancy, but see how much plays in that one? All right, so that cable is stretched, it's a pretty good amount. It still runs, it still operates, but it's not correct. It's actually, that's something that needs to be addressed. You're probably not getting full throttle when you ride this bike, and you know, everybody's going to want full throttle. So we know from looking online, we talked about it, this is the wrong tank based on the wrong sticker that's on it. We know somebody that has painted this engine. This is not the way the engine is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a natural aluminum color. If you look really close, you can see I've put a new carburetor on here. It's one of those aftermarket Chinese carburetors. Now I'm going to tell you, a lot of guys don't like those aftermarket carburetors, and that's fine on their bike. If they want to put a $100 carburetor on there, they can do that. This is my bike. I don't have a problem with them. I've been through a lot of them. I've had one, maybe two over the couple of years that I've been doing this that were actually bad. Overall, I'd say they're probably 90%. Are they as good as original equipment? No, they are not. I've got a bike over there. It's an 83 Big Red. I haven't done a thing to that bike except put a battery in it. I put a battery in it, put fuel in it, and it started up. I haven't adjusted anything. I haven't tuned it. I haven't messed with the carburetor. That bike is set for 30 years and it still runs and idles and drives. I think that's a testament to how good those carburetors are. This bike, when I got it, didn't have a carburetor. So I needed a carburetor for it, and I wasn't about to spend $100 for one for a bike that's probably not going to be ridden that much. It's not going to be my favorite bike, and so I wasn't going to invest that kind of money into it. That said, to each his own. So here we got an aftermarket carburetor. We see you got a fuel filter here, so that's good. Somebody's doing the right thing. That and a new petcock, because it's nice and clean and shiny, would probably lead me to believe if somebody put a fuel filter and a petcock and a carburetor on a bike, they probably went the extra mile and put a new air filter on it. It's a $35 gamble. Are you willing to risk it? In order to check that air filter on this bike, you've got to take this rack off, which requires tools. Then the fenders come off and the seat's part of the fenders on this bike. If the seller would allow you to do that, then that's a great option. If it comes down between making the sale and not making the sale, the seller may take that off for you. Certainly worth asking. Gear shifters. See how much play's in the gear shifter? They are adjustable to take some of that play out, but what you don't want to see is you don't want to see somebody have welded this shifter on here. Okay? If that's welded on there, that is cause for concern. It's not an issue today, but it might become an issue because once it breaks off, then you're stuck for welding it back on again. You see these foot pegs here? These are broken off. These are replaceable. You can get them. They're like 40 bucks though. Keep that in mind if it's important to you. You know, some guys, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal to me, but it might be to you. So looking at the seat, this has got an aftermarket seat on it. The seat's in a really, really good condition. It's got a little stain on it right here, but then again, that's being really nitpicky. These rear fenders are really, really in good shape. The rubber splash guards are still intact and they're complete. This one does have a little hole on this side where it's rubbed into something, but it's very, very minor. And if you're going to ride this bike, you're going to hurt it more than that anyway. So we're not talking about trailer queens or museum bikes here. We're talking about three-wheelers that guys want to ride in the woods and have fun with their buddies. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about having fun. We're not talking about collecting. We're not talking about restoring. We're talking about just getting a bike and enjoying it. It's what they were meant to be, you know, what they were made for. So I get down here to show you the biggest problem with hardtails is frame rust. And this is where the problem comes in at. You have the skid plate down here. It's held on with 4 bolts on the bottom. It holds leaves and debris and you know, mud and that kind of stuff. And that causes these frame rails to rot out. And once they rot out, then of course you have to cut a section out and replace it and weld it. If you're capable of that, that's fine. But most people probably aren't or don't want to mess with it, let's say that. So check your frame right in here, right where the engine cradle meets the backbone here of the frame. And this lower part of the frame, I guess that wouldn't be the backbone. But this is all that holds the rear suspension, or the rear axle, excuse me, the rear axle in place on a hardtail is this lower 2 frame rails. And then as it curves up and around. It's very important that these are solid. If they are broken, you can weld them up and you can plate over that area. I've taken the skid guard off, put a plate underneath it after repairing the tube, put a plate underneath it, and then put the skid guard back on. That is a fine repair if need be. This is a tip that I thought was pretty interesting that I kind of ran across years ago. Look at all the nuts and bolts. What I mean by that, look at your engine bolt. That's the head of a bolt. You got 4 up here, it's the head of the bolt, head of the bolt. You got 1 down here, it's the head of the bolt, and there's 1 up underneath the tank. And what I'm pointing that out for you too is because when Honda put these bikes together, all the bolts came from the right side, all the nuts came from the left side to bolt on. A lot of guys, when they pull the engine out or do a motor swap, they'll just throw the bolt in there and they don't care the orientation of the bolt. So if you notice that half the bolts are going the wrong direction or the opposite direction as they should have been, somebody's probably pulled that engine out, and that's cause for concern. You know, you want to ask the question, well, did you pull the engine out? Why was the engine pulled out? Is it the original engine? Just information for you. Even if it's not the original engine, but it runs and drives, what's the big deal? You know, there isn't a big deal as long as it fits and it works and it's the right thing. Who knows what happened to the original engine? Keep in mind that these are fun bikes. They're inexpensive. That's why they're popular. They're popular because people don't want $8,000 for a four-wheeler. They want to spend $2,000 and they want to go ride in the backyard or in the woods. So keep that in mind when you're scrutinizing one of these bikes. Keep in mind it's cheap. It's cheap fun. It really can be if you careful with how you spend your money. The handlebar grips and how that they're only worn when the bike is in operation. You know, just like the foot pegs, but still, you look at a pair of handlebar grips, it can tell you so much about a bike. How is it taken care of? How many miles are on it? You know, are the handlebars bent? Has the bike been rolled over? I've got a bike around here. Let's see if I can find it. Here's one. This is an original handlebar grip on an 83 Big Red. Look at that. That thing is worn completely smooth. That bike has got 1,000,000 miles on it probably. That's an exaggeration. Wear items. Handlebar grips. Foot pegs. Gear selector. Brake pedal. I gotta tell you, I went and looked at a 185S one time. This guy was a real piece of work. I get there, tank, fuel's coming out of the carburetor. I mean, just pouring out of the carburetor. The guy gets it started with a piece of rope, and I mean just a piece of rope wrapped around his hand. He had it down around the crank and snatches it, and the bike runs. Now, the bike wasn't as cheap as it should have been. The bike fired up. Holes in the gas tank. You could see the gas as it sloshed in and out of the gas tank. You could see through it. Fenders were not bolted on. They were broken, and they weren't going back on. He says, "Do you want to ride it?" And because I'm looking to buy it. And I'm like, "No, I think I'm going to let you ride it." He says, "All right." I said, "Where's the brake pedal at?" He said, "Man, these things didn't have good brakes when they were made." And he took off and he rode that thing flat out with 0 brakes. He's dodging cars and fence posts, and he comes back up and literally puts his foot on the ground to stop it. And he says, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think I'm going to pass." I drove an hour to look at that bike. I was kind of in the area already, but again, it wasn't my bike. I watched that bike change hands 3 times in probably 6 weeks on Marketplace. I watched 3 different people buy that bike, try to fix it up, and then sell it to recoup their money. And every time it sold, it got worse. That said, the more complete a bike is, the better off you are. Don't think you can buy a bike and go get some cheap fenders. I've talked about this in other videos. There's a lot of people that disagree with me, and that's okay. I disagree with them. The bulk of your investment is going to be in the fenders, the tank, and the seat. Those 3 items are the most expensive items to replace. Case in point, 1983, the exact same year, make, and model as that bike over there. 185S. I did my second video, Will It Run, was this exact same bike. It had different wheels and tires on it. I've pulled those wheels and tires off because they were probably more valuable than the rest of the bike. This bike runs and drives and runs really, really well. It needs a ton of work. Unfortunately, it would cost more to make this bike look like that bike than what the bike's worth. So you find yourself in a situation to, what do you do with this bike? Do you part it out? Do you leave it like it is? If you leave it like it is, nobody's going to want to give you anything for it. I mean, just, what do you think it's worth looking at it? Honestly, $500, you know, if you were lucky, if somebody had to have it. But I don't think you could get $500 for that bike. I think that's probably a $250 bike all day long like it sits. And it runs and drives and stops. It's actually a pretty nice bike. As you know, I try to save them all, but there's some bikes that just aren't worth saving financially. I've assessed this bike several different ways, and I still haven't come up with a plan for it yet. I'm not sure. The motor's great. It runs great. It's a good running engine. The front end's in really good shape. The tank is in good shape on the inside. The outside is, you know, it's cosmetic. The rest of the bike, is it worth $0? No. you can ride it today. That's got to be worth something. But if you get somewhere and you're looking at a bike, and anything for that matter, and it doesn't pass muster, is what they say, that's the saying. If you see something that looks out of place, if you see a crack in the frame, or it doesn't look as good as the pictures, you know, said it did, or I had this happen. I went and looked at a bike, and the pictures that the guy sent me were about 5 years older than what the bike currently looked like. The bike didn't look nothing like what was in the pictures. And I asked the guy, I was kind of upset, you know. I wasted my afternoon and my time, and I said, why doesn't it look like it did in the pictures you sent me yesterday? Well, those are old pictures. I was like, well, that would have been nice to know yesterday, because I wouldn't have came. And I told him, I said, you know, it's not how you represented it, but I'm not going to go down that road. And I said, I'm going to pass. And I walked away from it. And so, you know, you have to be willing to do that anytime you're buying stuff. And so that said, and I'm going to touch on this later in another video. Meet people in a neutral location if you can. I know that it's not always going to work out for you, and three-wheelers can be that way, especially because you're going to want to ride them. But if you're buying bikes, especially cheap bikes, try to meet somebody in a neutral spot, a big parking lot, a Walmart parking lot. They've got cameras out there. We've got a little town here just down the road from us. The police department has taken 2 parking spots, and they've deemed them Craigslist only parking spots. And I know that sounds funny, but what it allows people to do is go to a safe spot. You pull in one parking spot, the buyer or the seller pulls in the other parking spot, and you conduct your transaction in front of the police department. The chances of getting mugged I know you're going to want to ride them, and I know you're going to want to test them out, and you should. But you also have to keep in mind that the world is different than it used to be, and it's not a bad idea to meet in a public space. Take a deep breath. Think about what you're doing. When you go to look at something, look at the big picture. Look at the bike overall. Look at the condition of it. Look at where it's parked. That's a good one. You see a bike that's been parked in the same spot for a long time, and there's a big puddle of oil underneath the bottom of it. It's got a leak, okay? So you see a bike that's pushed out in the fresh cut grass. You can't tell by that, so you ask the question, and be pretty firm about it. Where do you normally park this at, sir or ma'am? Oh, it's over there by the tractor. Well, go look over there next to the tractor. Look over there and see if there's a big puddle of oil or coolant, depending on what you're looking for. You know, transmission fluid if you're looking at something with automatic training in it. You know, ask the questions. You'd be surprised. You get home, and I've had this happen too. You open up the garage door and you got your new purchase sitting there, and you're all excited to go for a ride, and you look underneath it and there's a little drop of oil about that big. I'm like, man, I didn't notice that when I bought the bike. Well, that's because I bought that bike. It was outside sitting in some fresh cut grass. Rode, drove, fine. So what was it? Well, it was the gasket on the oil plug was leaking. Minor fix. But it could have been something a lot worse than that. It could have been a number of different things. So ask questions. Where does the bike normally sit? Where was it parked before you brought it out here and washed it off with the hose? You know, how long have you owned the bike? Did you buy it new? You know, have you done any work to it? When's the last time was it serviced? When's the last time you rode it? How long's it been sitting here? You know, you don't want to just throw all those questions at one time at a seller, but you certainly want to work them into a conversation. You talk about the weather, and then you ask a question about where it normally sits. And then you talk about, you know, how pretty their house is, and then you ask them when's the last time it's been serviced. And so you work those questions in like that in a conversation, so the seller doesn't get perturbed, if you will, of you just showing up asking a bunch of hard questions to them. They're not going to like that, and they're not going to be real nice to you. But you need to know that information to make an informed decision. Every little piece of information that you can obtain justifies the amount of money that you're willing to spend for the bike, whether it's a lot or a little. It doesn't matter, it's still your money. And as the buyer, you have the control. I've said it before. You are in the driver's seat, literally. The deal doesn't move forward unless you're willing to spend the money. And so be slow, be specific in your questions. Take in as much of the time, take as much time as you need. If a seller gets aggravated that you're taking too long, walk away. Thank them for their time, thank them for their hospitality, walk away. It's not worth it. Don't let them rush you into making a bad decision. It's just not worth it. You're going to end up with something that you're not happy with, and then you're going to end up selling it, and then you're just going to have a bad taste in your mouth, and then nobody wins from that. So take your time, take a friend with you. I think that's really important. Whether if they know three-wheelers or not, take a friend with you. It's somebody to watch your back. Simple as that. It's just somebody to when you're looking at the bike, somebody's over here watching your back because they know you showed up with $2,000 in cash. Take a friend. They don't have to be some big guy or gal for that matter. Just another pair of eyes. You know, you'd be surprised at how many people that are not always on the up and up will be on the up and up when they're outnumbered or when there's another witness to a situation. Take a friend. You may need them to load it anyway. So there's nothing like an extra pair of hands to put a three-wheeler in the bed of a pickup truck. For watching, I appreciate it. I hope I shared a few tips with you, some things to look for. Hit the subscribe button and like button if you will. It means a lot to the channel. We're growing every day, and if it helps you, then it's worth doing. And that's pretty much the bottom line, as they say. Thank you. Y'all take care.